This sandstone figure that we see here represents the birth of the Buddha. You can see the tiny seated Buddha emerging from his mother's right side. The Buddha's mother gave birth standing up, supported by her sister and balanced by the branch of a flowering tree which she holds in her upraised right hand. It was not only a miraculous birth, but also a miraculous conception. The Buddha's mother is named Maya, and she conceived after dreaming of a white elephant entering her side. The pregnancy lasted 10 months, not the normal 9 months. She gave birth in a special grove of trees as she was proceeding to her parents' home. This stone sculpture was certainly made in an ancient workshop where there were numerous artisans working full-time to produce the immense amount of stone sculpture that was needed for over thousands of temples. The stone sculpture that we see was originally placed inside a niche within a brick temple. This sculpture is from Myanmar's major temple site called Pagan. The particular temple from which this image came is actually dated by a stone inscription to 1198. That's at the end of the 12th century. So we know exactly when it was created. Keep in mind that the dates, this corresponds more or less with Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, also from the 12th century. One of the few things that you can spot immediately is the Buddha's mother, Maya, grasping in her right hand, her raised right hand, the tree. This tree is a special tree, and in Buddhist texts it's known as, it's a flowering tree that she's holding. Many people have seen this associated with the fecundity of nature that India is so associated with. But strangely, the Buddhist texts don't mention this aspect, but rather talk about the miracle that occurred when the branch by itself bent down. And you can see its function in some ways, helping to support the Buddha's mother as she is giving birth. The woman we see next to the Buddha's mother is known as Prajapati, who is the Buddha's aunt. And after 7 days, the Buddha's mother dies, and the child rearing is now completely in the hands of his aunt, the Buddha's mother's sister. The female figure to the right of the two large standing figures is almost certainly an attendant. Remember, when the Buddha's mother returned to her native village in order to give birth to the Buddha, she was accompanied by a huge entourage. And this woman, perhaps holding a fly whisk in her raised upper hand, would be considered part of the entourage as an attendant. The small figures that we see to the left by the Buddhas, just below the emerging Buddha out of his mother's side, indicate the divinity of the Buddha. For example, at the very top, we see the two gods supporting the Buddha. You see the little tiny figures, two gods supporting the Buddha on what is called in the text a golden net. And beneath, two world guardians supporting the Buddha on a special antelope skin. And finally, two mortals supporting the Buddha on a normal cloth. Now, at the very base, by the Buddha's mother's feet, we see the standing Buddha in the center of this ensemble, protected, shielded by an umbrella, a sign of royalty. Now, this represents the Buddha's first 7 steps. How the stone sculpture was used in ancient Myanmar is very debatable, since we have so few written records about how these temples were used. They were certainly created by royalty and by nobles. That much we know. And many of the temples contained imagery, either painted or in stone like this, featuring the major events in the Buddha's life. One of the universal messages about this image and others in the exhibition is that the Buddha himself, while a human, was considered divine. And this miraculous birth coming from the side, the gods honoring the Buddha on the left, all of these features signify that this was a miraculous birth. And of course, this brings to mind the miraculous birth of Christ. And the people have made comparisons, and they're interesting in their own right. But I think it probably speaks to this universal need for divinities to be divine. And while they have a human dimension, they're really basically divine.